Have you ever wondered, why do we need so many COVID injections? In order to answer that question, we first must understand how the body is able to recognize and defeat COVID 19. Meet COVID 19. COVID 19 is covered in lots of different proteins, such as the S protein, the M protein, or the E protein. Each protein has its own function. The E and M proteins are primarily involved in viral assembly, or they're proteins that help the virus assemble itself inside the cell. The S protein, also known as the spike protein, plays a crucial role in penetrating the host cells to initiate infection because viruses need to enter the cell, deposit their DNA or RNA into the cell, and use the cell mechanisms to make more viruses. So the S protein helps the virus insert its genetic material and other proteins needed to make the cell replicate more viruses. Now, I would like you to meet the antibody. Two main structures of the antibody are called the antigen binding sites. Now, imagine, for example, that you have a lock and a key. The lock is the COVID 19 protein, such as the S protein, and the key is an antigen binding site. Now, each antibody is unique for each antigen. So the antibody, or antigen binding site, acts like a unique key for the COVID protein. If there are any changes in the COVID protein, the antibody may not work as well or may not work at all. Before I go any further, I would like to make 3 points. One, I'm only going to talk about what's known as the adaptive immune response. This is the immune response your body has for a particular antigen, virus or protein or something like that. It isn't a general one. Second, I want to remind everybody that the processes that I'm going to be describing are actually far more complex than I actually presented here. And finally, I want to focus on the antibody formation only of the adaptive immune system. There's actually a lot more to the adaptive immune response than what I'm going to talk about here. This is only a small part of it. So the COVID-19 virus enters the human body. It will then encounter something called an antigen-presenting cell. There are lots of different kinds of antigen-presenting cells. One example is a macrophage. The antigen-presenting cell will swallow up the COVID-19 virus, and then it will present onto its surface virus proteins. For example, the S protein. The antigen-presenting cell will then encounter a T helper cell. And on the surface of this T helper cell are special receptors called TCRs, or T cell receptors. Each receptor for a T helper cell is unique for a particular antigen or protein. These receptors are on the surface of the T helper cell. Once the T helper cell interacts with the antigen that's presented to it, it will become activated and release a lot of various kinds of chemicals. When it comes in contact with something called a naive B cell, which is a B cell which has just come from the bone marrow, this B cell also has special receptors on its surface. Now what happens is when this B cell comes in contact with this T cell, the B cell will become active and turn either into a memory B cell, which will remember this particular protein or antigen, or it will become a plasma cell. And a plasma cell will make the antibodies. The plasma cell will then produce all of the antibodies necessary to bind to the proteins of the COVID-19 virus. Once those antibodies intercept a COVID-19 virus, they will then bond onto the surface of that virus. This does the following two things for the body. One, it stops the virus from being able to reproduce, and two, it marks it for other cells in the body to eat and remove the virus or the pathogen from the body.
So now that we know how the body fights off COVID-19, why do we need so many shots? You remember from the video I had two main components for the antibody response. You had the antibodies themselves and you had the B cells. And I'm going to focus on those two at the moment right now. Now, let's talk about the antibodies. The antibodies, they're the big guns of the body. They're the things that both neutralize pathogens so they can't replicate in the body, and they identify pathogens for the body so the body can eat them up and destroy them. Pathogen being like a virus or a bacteria or something your body doesn't want inside of it. So what happens with the vaccine? Well, I get my first initial shot of the vaccine, Now this has got something called messenger RNA in it. Now this isn't some special little fancy thing that's going to change my DNA or anything like that. Messenger RNA is very specific. All it does is tell the body how to make a protein. That's all. And so it enters the body says, hey, I know what this messenger RNA is. It makes the protein that's built for the instructions, and that is it. All right? Nothing else to worry about it. So my body makes all these proteins, and in this case, it's the spike protein. Okay? So my body makes the spike proteins, and now the immune system says, oh my gosh, I got this thing inside of me. Well, I have to do something with it. I have to fight this. And so it does that whole thing you saw before, right? It goes through the T cell, the T helper cells, and the B cells, and makes plasma B cells, and makes memory B cells, and makes antibodies. And it fights off these little bits of protein. Now, these little bits of protein, they don't make me sick. They don't do anything to me. They don't invade my cells. Nothing happens. The reason why I might not feel well is my body says, oh my gosh, there's this stuff inside of me. I have to get rid of it. Okay? So what happens after I've got my first vaccination? Those numbers go down. The amount of antibodies go down. The amount of memory B cells go down. All that other stuff. Now, why is it important about the antibodies going down? Now, my antibodies, like I said, they're the big guns. Here's the thing. If I have a lot of antibodies running through my bloodstream and I meet COVID-19, my COVID-19, the first thing it's going to meet is an antibody. And that antibody is going to bind onto it. It's going to stop it from replicating. It's going to identify it for the body to destroy. And I don't get sick. If I don't have a lot of antibodies, maybe I'll get a little sick. Maybe the COVID-19 will get a chance to infect my cells. But not much of one, because it's going to latch onto them as quickly as they can. I'm going to make more of them. Bam, I'm going to get better. And even if I have no antibodies in my body at the time, yes, I'll still get sick because it takes my body time to react to the COVID-19, but I won't get sick for as long because I don't have to learn this new stuff anymore, and I don't get as sick as I might have normally gotten. So those are really the benefits of getting vaccinated. Now about those antibody numbers, right? They come down. I get my second shot. My body says, oh my gosh, again, makes more of them. Now it's really determined. It says, you know what, I have to remember this stuff. This thing's important. I've already made it twice. This is a big deal. Okay? So boosts them up, says, I'm going to have to remember this B cells. You're going to have to remember a little bit longer. You're going to have to remember this. This is really, really important. All right? Now, things go up. My antibody count goes up, and they come back down over time. Why does it come back down over time? Well, let's say that over the course of my lifetime, I've probably had thousands, if not more, of various infections, many of which I don't even know about, right? I don't know everything that I've encountered because not actually everything that I ever encounter makes me sick. So my body is not going to keep around in large quantities antibodies for every single thing I've ever encountered. I think if that were true, I'd probably just be antibodies. That's all my body would be. I wouldn't be me. So they have to come down. And that's what the memory B cells are for, is to remember how to make them so they can come down. And if I need it again, I can turn to my memory B cells. Even with that being said, not everything gets remembered forever, right? Let's say I get a minor cold, right? It's not that big a deal. I get little sniffles, a couple days. My body's like, hey, this is no big deal. I'll have these memory B cells, but they're not going to last that long. Okay? Now, let's say you've got something really big, all right? I get smallpox. My body says, oh my gosh, this is terrible. This is awful. I have to remember this. This will really take me down. So those memory B cells will last a lot longer. COVID, we're not sure how long it lasts for COVID, and that's part of the issue. We want to make sure that our immunity is present for as long as possible, especially with a raging pandemic around us. So why do we get the third inoculation and the fourth inoculation? Well, they're to keep those antibody numbers high. They're to make sure that my body is constantly primed for a COVID infection. That way, if COVID comes in, my body says, hey, I know it, I got antibodies, and boom, it prevents infection. Or it makes sure that the infection's mild, and so that I don't get very sick and I don't get sick for as long. Okay? And that we have to keep having these as long as COVID-19 is inside of our communities. We really need to keep that immunity up because our body doesn't know if other people are sick. It only knows what it encounters. And that vaccine is a reminder. It's telling the body, hey, there's COVID out there. You need to be ready for it. Please be ready for it. Keep those antibodies up because we got to stay protected. And that's the only way my body really knows. That's the only way it knows is whatever comes inside of it. That's all. Okay? It can't read minds. It can't read the newspaper. It doesn't know these sorts of things. And you know what? We do this with all sorts of other vaccinations too. We do it with tetanus. Every 10 years, you're supposed to have a tetanus shot. And there's a reason why, okay? Because your body will forget tetanus. It'll draw down because I've not met tetanus in a long time. You may never actually meet tetanus in your entire life. But your body says, I haven't met it. I'm not going to keep the B cells around. You want it to remember tetanus. That's why we do that. If there were an outbreak of mumps or measles, they'd be telling the adult population, you need to get another shot of this because we need to tell your body, there's mumps and measles out there. You need to be protected. That's the point of vaccination, is to prepare your body for infection so that you won't get infected, or if you do, it's mild and it's not going to do really any harm to you. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you all learned something. If you did, please like and subscribe to my channel, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
This has been a video from Van Cleve Scientific. If you like this, please like and subscribe for more content.